Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Facebook. And if you're not watching us on Facebook, maybe you're listening to us as a podcast. Thank you, Andy Martin, for spreading us out there, getting the word out there, the court of public opinion. I'm Jeremy Cordeaux. Peter Clayton's behind the camera. Welcome to the show. Peter just was telling me before we rolled, if that's the right expression, what was the email that your friend got?
Yes, look, I won't mention names, but a friend of mine received an email from a sporting organisation.
Now listen to this, it's interesting.
And at the bottom of this email were 5 flags. The top flag was the Aboriginal flag. Beneath that was the Torres Strait Islander flag.
Yeah.
Beneath that was the rainbow flag.
Yeah.
Then there was a flag that he didn't know, he'd never seen before, and there...
Let me guess, the Tuvalu flag.
No.
Solomon Islands?
No, I'll tell you in a minute. Below that was the Australian flag.
Yeah.
So my friend emailed back to this organisation and said, what's going on here? Why is the Australian flag on the bottom?
Yeah.
And what is this 5th flag? He got an email back and they had put the Australian flag on top.
Yeah.
The flag that he didn't know turned out to be a transgender flag.
But there's no such thing as a transgender flag.
Well, apparently there is now.
And there is no, the rainbow flag, I don't know, that's sort of come along, probably born out of gay Mardi Gras and
Yes.
things like that. But why, this was a
sporting organisation.
a sporting organisation.
And they had a transgender flag. I will Google it later on. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I find it extraordinary that anyone could believe that a nation could have any future at all if it did not have one flag. Because what you're describing to me is almost the biblical scenario of a house divided against itself.
Yes.
It cannot stand.
Yes.
I mean, we've got people in this country who are willfully trying to undermine not only our future, but our very present. And sometimes, you know, I despair. Sometimes it's older people who allow younger activists into their sporting organisations, people who have an agenda. They don't want to do anything except change the world or change the status quo. When in actual fact, if you can't demonstrate that you're changing the status quo for better, why would you get any attention? In my world, you'd get pretty short shrift, like this fly is about to. Pete, it's back.
Yeah, well, I can get a can of Mortine.
I still think there is something strangely, I was going to say spiritual. I don't know.
Well, no, you've just got a friend.
Yeah, well, come here. See if we can make friends and I can talk it into just going away. Or giving me 20 minutes peace and quiet while I talk to you. It can't be all that difficult. Speaking of peace and quiet, we got a bit last week. In fact, this was a topic on our Friday live streaming show from the dining room table, jeremycordeaux.com, 9 to 12. Singtel, which is really the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund. Boy, do they have some money. Whoa. They own Optus. You know, the phone didn't ring for you last week? Wednesday? Thursday? Didn't ring for me. Maybe you couldn't even have seen our shows from last week. I don't know. Anyway, we sold Optus back in 2001 for $17.4 billion. If my memory serves me. Anyway, after the crisis of last week, the mega, I think they call it an outage, mega outage, it dropped $2 billion on the stock market, down 4.8%. Telstra went up, funnily enough, well, predictably enough. All the Optus directors were in town for a board meeting. Timing, ladies and gentlemen. They would have got a first-hand lesson in crisis management or, in fact, how not to handle a crisis. The The South Australian government's contract with Optus is in jeopardy, they tell me. Telstra is set to take over that business. That's the government business. They're going to have a federal investigation. Good. Which I hope will be made public. The last inquiry into the Optus data breach, which was, funnily enough, exactly almost 1 year ago, there were 3 inquiries into that. Not one was made public. Private in commercial confidentiality, whatever they say. My God, that hides a multitude of sins. Oh, and there will be no compensation. Optus say no compensation. Yet clearly a lot of people, a lot of businesses will have lost a lot of money. Optus is thinking free data to make up for the mess? Is that going to cut the mustard? I don't think so. The profit that Optus announced on Thursday around the board meeting was 141 million, which is not bad. It's down a bit on the previous year. But maybe the fly is an Optus customer. Anyway, did I hear anyone say class action? The lawyers will be rubbing their hands together, I have no doubt. Now, I'm surprised this is not making greater waves, media waves. In a way I'm surprised, in another way I'm not. We all know, I think, that the Labor Party is soft on border control. Up before the High Court of Australia, a case to decide on one of the most important deterrents to protect us from the people smugglers. And of course also not only us, but the people that the people smugglers smuggle, because a lot of them die. Now this deterrent of which I speak was the right to lock up illegal asylum seekers. Don't get on the boat and try to come here, because if you arrive illegally, you will never be allowed to stay. This was all part of John Howard's "We will decide who comes to Australia and the manner in which they come." And it worked brilliantly. Certainly it worked. This policy stopped the boats. The High Court had to decide if this would continue. You'd have thought it would have been a no-brainer. I mean, what side are they on? They were going to decide if it was legal. Could we continue to lock up asylum seekers indefinitely? Some with lengthy criminal records. The High Court has ruled no. No. A mortal blow to the policy that has kept us and our way of life safe. For the people smugglers, the sugar is back on the table. Money will be made, lives will be lost. And do you know why? Apart from a convicted paedophile taking the Commonwealth, how he got the money, who backed him, who were his lawyers? This convicted paedophile took the Commonwealth of Australia to the High Court to argue against his detention. Now, this is where I find it gets interesting. This government, this Labor government, mounted a weak or poor, or some would say feeble, case or argument to keep the status quo in place. Now, when I think back over it, and I wasn't in the court, I'm only going on what I have gleaned from a kind of I don't know, wishy-washy, lukewarm media report. The High Court did everything but say that the Commonwealth case or argument was half-hearted. Half-hearted, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before I go on any further, my eye is still not all that good, but let me try and read this to you. Inside the warped mind of paedophile refugee who is allowed to stay in Australia after landmark High Court ruling, details emerge about what he did in Sydney before he was locked up. A refugee who raped a 10-year-old boy in Sydney does not believe that he did anything wrong because, of course, it was culturally acceptable in his homeland. You know, this is what various people from Pakistan and the Middle East argue when it comes to female genital mutilation. They say it's cultural. I say they're butchers. You won't hear that in any other media. A refugee who raped a 10-year-old boy in his Sydney home did not believe he was doing anything wrong. His homeland, by the way, is Myanmar, which is another name for Burma. Burma. The paedophile was released from immigration detention this week after a High Court decision overrode previous determinations that he was a danger to the public. The court issued a landmark ruling that identified immigration detention as unlawful. Now, this was set in force a lot of years ago, 20 years ago. And now this government has proceeded in releasing almost 100, I had the figure of 90, but they say here 100 other non-citizens who cannot be deported to their homeland countries. Nobody wants these people, ladies and gentlemen, but the High Court of Australia wants us to have them on our streets. Almost all of these detainees had their visas cancelled over character issues, and many were previously convicted of sexual and other violent crimes. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but for a government to wage or commence a half-hearted argument to keep the status quo, the alternative to which was have these people on the streets, over 100 of them, because there are a couple of hundred other people in the wings. But more to come about this. The government wasted no time in releasing the first 90 detainees, by the way. That happened Sunday. And apart from the convicted paedophile, which I've just spoken of, there's a Malaysian hitman. Yeah, a Malaysian hitman. Convicted and with a price on his head in Malaysia. Now, do you believe it? The highest court in the land have put these people back on our streets. I somehow suspect they did it reluctantly, but by the letter of the law, which is their job. The government's job was to aggressively, adequately see to it that the Commonwealth won its case. And it didn't. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, it was because the government didn't have its heart in it. A consequence. Well, it's partly Labor Party policy. Maybe they want to fully dismantle the previous government's immigration policy. That's the one that worked, by the way. Why remove those important deterrents? The fact that illegal immigrants could be locked up indefinitely was a great way to keep Australia safe. So, here we go again. Here we go again. Now, if the media was doing its job, they would be tearing strips off this government instead of reading and republishing and rewording, mouthing their press releases. I shouldn't get worked up over all this stuff, Pete. I really shouldn't. But
Well, I think you should. Somebody has to.
Yep. I have heard no kind of condemnation of the procedure that has resulted in this terrible outcome. Anyway, be that as it may, I'll tell you something that you didn't know that you didn't know. Change the mood quickly. Have I got time?
Yeah.
Up until 1956, French school children, and I gather it was from about 7 years old till 17, French school children were given wine with their lunch. Every child was allowed half a litre a day. Isn't that nice? Oh dear. Hollywood strike is over. 118 days. 118 days, actors and writers. A strike over, I don't know, wages and artificial intelligence, conditions. Sure, there are maybe a dozen high-profile, highly paid actors who enjoy the limelight, but there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of people in that industry who struggle. The cost has been, they estimate, to be $9 billion. $9 billion, and I think it'll be a lot more than that, because there are a lot of other sort of hang-off kind of industries that work with and because of show business. Anyway, I've never seen sort of show business become militant like that, but they did. And that's the way it is. I'll leave you with some dates, if I may. 'Tis the 14th, isn't it, Pete?
Yes.
The 14th. The 14th of November. It's almost Christmas. It was the day of the Coventry Blitz. This is where the Germans bombed Coventry, which is a very big manufacturing back in the day when England, before the unions, thanks to the Lima Declaration, dismantled all of the manufacturing industry of England. They've got very little now, but back then Coventry was a huge centre for manufacturing, and it was, it was bombed almost to back into the Stone Age, 1940. A terrible, terrible time for the Brits. The Prince of Wales, speaking of Britain, Prince Charles Philip Arthur George was born. Happy birthday, Your Highness. The birthday of the King of England. But he came into the world as the Prince of Wales on this day in 1948. According to the 1985 Guinness Book of Records, the world's oldest dog, a cattle dog called Bluey, died. Les Hall of Rochester in Victoria owned the dog. Dog died 29 years of age, 203 years, human years. But the dog we talked about the other day, Pete, was
Bobby.
Bobby.
I can't remember what age.
I think 32 or something.
Can't remember what it was, but
rewritten the Guinness Book of Pet Records, I would think, by the sound of it. Freddie Garrity was born, former milkman and lead singer with Freddie and the Dreamers. Da, 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 da. What was the song he had?
No, I can't remember.
Freddie and the da, da, gee. It was a nice song. Back when nice songs sort of made the top 10. Jacqueline Suzanne, who went on to write some very racy books. Her first book was published in 1963. It was called Every Night, Josephine. About life with a French poodle called Josephine, who died in 1970, age 16. Every night. What did Napoleon say? Not tonight, Josephine?
Yes.
Oh, Jacqueline says, every night, Josephine. Ah, dear, oh dear. Princess Anne married Captain Mark Phillips in Westminster Abbey on this day in 1973. You know, they used to call him the Fog. I don't know. Well, actually, I suppose I do know why. He was, I don't know where he is now. He sort of drifted into where that sort of no man's land that former royals drift into when they are no longer royals. He came out here, Land Rover brought him out here, because he was doing an endorsement for Land Rovers. Because I suppose back in the day, even royalty had to, earn a quid on the side. And we were given amazing instructions as to, because I was among, I don't know, it was a nice table of about, 10, 15 people, and we all had dinner with Mark Phillips, Captain Mark Phillips. And we were given all our riding instructions as to what we could ask him and what we couldn't ask him. But he wasn't a very talkative gentleman. And then somebody explained to me later that they called him the Fog. Anyway, Princess Anne is now a much happier woman, I think. She's married to her former bodyguard. Pete, you could make a movie out of that.
You could. You could. Yeah.
I'm thinking of the theme song. Dear, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny. What else can I say? Robert Fullerton was born in Pennsylvania. US engineer. He's the man who invented the first steamboat, 1765. Mamie Eisenhower was born, wife of the 34th American president, 1896. Leonard Bernstein made his first conducting debut, or he made his debut, with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in 1943. Robert Whitehead died in England, British engineer. He invented the naval torpedo in 1866. In 1905, on this very day, the great Bart Cummings was born here in Adelaide in 1927. And what else? Oh, the BBC went to air for the first time. It beat Australia by 1 year. Yeah, beat Australia by 1 year. 1922 it went to air. Went to air with a news bulletin. It's still interesting, but rather woke and rather lefty. I listen sometimes to the BBC overnight when I can't sleep. It's, I don't know, a diversion. Thank you very much for being with us here in the Court of Public Opinion, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget jeremycordeaux.com on Friday. We'll broadcast again another 3 hours from 9 o'clock. From the dining room table where radio in Australia began, down on Green Hill Road at Parkside, at the table of the Hume family. 100 years on, we're doing the same thing. I don't know with how much success. I really don't. We had Pete, I don't know if you were listening, you had a doctor's appointment, I think. You were out. No, we had one of those chaotic mornings. We had a guest who didn't turn up. Anyway, look, it's all good fun, all good. Grist for the mill. Have a lovely day, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you tomorrow here in the Court of Public Opinion in the garage. Believe in yourself. Goodbye from me, Jeremy Cordeaux, and Peter Clayton. Bye for now.